The Singapore Zoo was a project that I was involved with. I was working with primary school teachers from Townend High School. I think I've jumped ahead of myself here. I'll describe the curricular context in a second, but really this is the role, this is the game encapsulated in this slide here. This is the text that the students were given to introduce them to the whole activity. You're caught by some poachers and have just made an escape. You're heading home to the zoo now, but at the same time facing dangers of meeting your predators. Hence, you must avoid certain animals and their enclosures according to your diet. To avoid being preyed on, you need to use your survival tool, the PDA, to strategize your safe return. The team which completes the most tasks and has avoided the most pitfalls wins the game. So you've got a plot there, you've got an identity for people, you've got a kind of a very simple game mechanic, be in some places, don't be in other places, a kind of a nice narrative excuse for the fact that you're holding a PDA in your furry paw. And in order to succeed at this, you need to have engaged with certain elements of the primary school biology curriculum as practiced at Townend Primary School. The idea is that you are either a herbivore or a carnivore or an omnivore. If you're not a carnivore, you should try and not standing near a carnivore, otherwise you'll be eaten. You need to make sure that you're standing in locations where your food sources are present and so on. And it really was focusing very much on, I think, taxonomy, sorting, classifying, those kind of basic biology concepts. The technology used for this was Mediascapes. So if you've not used it, this is very similar to some of the things, stuff that was linked to in the chat window a second ago, that various kind of virtual hotspots are marked out using the authoring tools and using the client tools on the PDAs. Students can stand within different regions, they'll be given different tasks and information depending on where they are. There's some pictures here I think you can see. This is for those listening later without the slides, there's a picture of a laptop, my laptop in the zoo. It's a very hot place to work, with a map with various locations marked out on it, and there's a device next to it, a tiny HCC Glowfish, which is a fantastic portable phone thing with GPS built in. And the idea was that the authors, the teachers, would mark out different hotspots and learn to use the authoring tool. So from their point of view, they had to kind of begin to think of themselves as not just teachers and instructors, but also designers. Now that's quite a common professional ask, I think, in Europe, but in Singapore it was something that was quite new to people. And so lots of my work was really in supporting teachers to think of themselves as having a kind of an extra string to their bow. This is a part of the zoo itself. It's a very managed place, although it's very well done. If you're ever in Singapore, I'd recommend a visit. There's no fences, there's no barbed wire or cages to walk into to speak of. All the security is provided by very carefully landscaped moats and ditches and so on. There are lots of signs around advertising the various locations, and this is one of my favourites, The Colourful World of Monkeys. And it's such a colourful world. So this is a map that we managed to wrestle out of the administration block. It's a scale map that was essential to us in putting the project together, because of course it's very hard to mark out a GPS region on a non-scale map. This is the non-scale map that gets given to you if you're a tourist. You can see it's a lot more stylized, much more symbolic, much harder to work out how far apart things are. I think it's interesting because there are two different ways of representing the same space, and that's an idea we'll return to shortly. So that was the Singapore Zoo. I'm just going to mention the third project, Savannah. Quite old now, I think, quite well established. My colleagues at Future Lab back in 2004, 2003 started to put this together with the BBC and HP R&D. I won't go into a massive long description of it because there's a paper that's referenced here from JCal, Facer et al. 2004. But in short, it's working at a local secondary school with the students. They're using the devices on their playing field. The playing field is a savannah in the virtual world. The students are not students but lions, and their task is to sustain themselves, to respond appropriately to the various threats to their person that spring up in this savannah. And to do that, to to learn about the various threats that are there, to understand what the place looks like. In fact, to access the whole world, they use the PDAs that HP very kindly provided. So for the researchers, that was, oh, that's interesting, Geography Ecologist, what a great title. Thanks, Andy. What's interesting from a learning point of view is understanding the challenges of the different terrain and understanding what lions can and can't do. So, for example, a lion shouldn't try and attack an elephant on their own, but in a pack they may scare it slightly. From a research point of view, again, this is quite novel at the time. Again, I point you to the paper where Kerry and her colleagues write about this much more lucidly than I'm going to describe it here. This is a picture of some of the kids playing. You can see the standard kind of a mobile setup, pre-iPhone at least. You've got iPacks with GPS attachments and headphones to access the oral data, and these three girls are hunting in packs. And you can see more packs behind them. This is a slide looking at the representation of the space back in the den. The den was a kind of a location set up within the school for kids to return to, look at their performance, compare what other people did, access more information about the kind of the roles that they're playing and so on. What's interesting about this picture to me, apart from, as Andy quite rightly points out, the engagement, the blobs of colour on the whiteboard there are the regions of the map. So that's underneath this blob of colour is a standard school playing field, and on top of it is this savannah that you can see here marked out in various shades of green and red and yellow and so on. So that's a very, very quick sketch of the three. What I'd like to do now is to share with you the kind of framework I've been using to look at these and others, and really just to have a discussion afterwards about where this is useful and where it's not, and what your thoughts are on how important it is to look at the underlying design of these kind of activities. So I'm starting with a look at context. From a sociocultural point of view, I think I'm assuming, please, one of you shout out if this isn't your view, but I think on the whole, most collections of learning researchers and education people that I gather around at the moment are used to using a sociocultural perspective to understand what's going on in their learning, and of course context is a hugely important part of that. It's understood everywhere to be not just the physical surroundings of the learner, but also their intellectual environment, so the kind of the conceptual apparatus that they bring to bear on the various different tasks, their behaviours, their habits of mind, and so on. Their histories, their expectations, their relationships with each other and with the school and the institution and the teacher and so on. And these kind of elements of the context that learners are in are understood not to be fixed and static, the things that you can just list and quantify and put into a computer program perhaps, but that they're fluid, that they each affect the others, that they're continuously reproduced, that they're dynamic. And this is, there's a couple of links there that I can provide for references for on the wiki. But this is a general kind of broad sociocultural approach to context. It's a moving thing. It's very, very important. It's what allows us to talk about distributed cognition and situated learning and so on. Obviously, in mobile learning context is very, very important, and people like John Traxler and Mike Sharples have made that very, very clear, and I'm not going to try and rehash what they've done very clearly already. What I am going to say is that when I was looking at mediascapes and technologies that needed GPS to work, that were very tightly bound, in other words, to a particular location, the existing frameworks, the existing accounts of mobile learning didn't really acknowledge the fact that these activities were taking place in a physical space. That the work of Mike and his team, and Neil, who I know is another MobiMoot presenter, Josie Taylor and so on. There are some extremely thorough and well worked out general accounts of mobile learning that focus on the interactional elements, the conversational elements, tend to have their roots in Pask's conversation theory and Engestrom's activity theory. These are obviously very, very useful and theoretically very solid, but they don't, to me, really foreground the place of space. Whereas if you use any kind of location-based technology, of course, that's one thing that's massively distinctive about it. And as educators, the distinction between classroom-based IM-type interaction, CMC, computer-mediated communication, and the kind that happens when you're outside in the open air, they're very, very different. And to me, the differentiating factor there is space. So I was interested in talking about space in a way that would fit with this idea that we already have of context, because obviously space is just one part of the context. As well as this, I noticed that it's very often that you find the distinction between the real world and the virtual world in the literature talking about mobile learning, that you've got a real world, which is the sticks and stones and grass and tarmac that make up the location, and then you've got whatever's in the device, the virtual world. And there's kind of a very strict binary distinction that's consistent in the literature here, and I'm thinking of people like Klopfer and Squire from MIT, and of course right back to some of the earliest work from Roche LMP. What I'd like to suggest is that when people engage in mobile learning activities that have a degree of role-playing or narrative or identity, that this binary distinction is maybe a bit rigid, it's a bit hard, it doesn't help us to understand what's actually going on, I think. So that was the context, really. That was why I thought it might be nice to come up with something else. So there we go. That's what I just said. That slide. That's good. What I've come up with is a three-dimensional analysis. I'm not going to dwell on the theoretical thinking behind that. It's I'll just say in short, it's derived from accounts of the social production of space, particularly from Lefebvre, but also from kind of more general phenomenological approach as espoused by Dowrish and so on. I can go into detail. I will go into detail if you give me half a chance, but it doesn't seem like the kind of detail that's relevant right now. Just to say that this is what I'm showing right now. It's the three dimensions of a mobile learning experience. I've rather arbitrarily called topological scape, semiotic scape, and rhetorical scape. This isn't to say that a mobile learning experience happens in one or the other, or that they happen at different times. They're just ways of kind of hitting pause, as it were, on our conception of the experience and laying it out in a way that helps us understand a bit better what's going on. So just to take a little bit of time to unpack what those mean, or rather what I intend them to mean, the topological scape is basically just stuff. There's no minds, there's no one looking at it or understanding it or naming it. It's purely what's going on. Really, it's the physical world with physical laws, external reality, and that's an end of it. The subject, the mind, the perceiver, the subject, the learner comes in when we talk about the semiotic scape. So that's the same location, just with someone being conscious of it. And then that's when you start thinking about culture and purpose and activity and goals and so on. A quick aside here, this is a good example, I think, of a location that is quite interesting when you split it on these two levels. It's a picture of part of the Stone Circle at Avebury. Lovely picture from a Flickr user whose URL is down there. I forget the name. From a topological point of view, it's fairly easy to describe. You've got this big flat grassy area, and you've got these hard knobbly things in front of you that you can walk around but not through, but you can probably climb on, and in the background you've got these spiky things that might bear your weight but might not. The point is you've got a very, very clearly defined set of physical affordances in the landscape. But if you start trying to understand it with a human mind, you've got, well, for a start, there is a circle, so you've got the concept of inside and outside the circle, but beyond that you've got the cultural ideas of the people who put the things up in the first place, what they're trying to achieve, and you've got our own ideas of what they were doing, our own understanding of it as a nice day out, or a tourist place, or a place to, you know, celebrate the solstice. So that's an illustration really of how one place can be described along these two different scapes. This third scape, the rhetorical scape, is really well, it's something that I'm suggesting is brought about by engaging with some form of mediascape and some form of location-based mobile experience. And I guess what I'm asking everyone to discuss here is how far is that true of any mobile learning experience, and how far is it specific to certain kinds of mobile learning experience. Really what engaging with the role that the mediascape offers you does is it gives you new reasons to be in the same place. It gives you the chance to think, what if I was a lion, and behave as if you were a lion. You're not actually a lion, no one thinks you're actually a lion, but you get to behave as if you were a lion, or in the Singapore example, a sun bear, or an alligator, or what have you. What's interesting about this rhetorical scape is that people move between and this is taken from the Savannah paper, but it's also something I observed with the Singapore crew, that people don't necessarily put on one identity at the expense of another. then it's possible to inhabit both to different degrees.